And for commodities market update, I'm being joined by Nwajide, one of the research analysts with Financial Derivatives Company. Good morning, Nosike. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chimezi. Always my pleasure.
Well, ordinarily, by tomorrow, Nigerians should be paying more for electricity, but that seemed to have been moved till next year. But how welcoming is this move?
I think we keep kicking the can down the road. It's something that should have happened long before now. It was scheduled for March. It was moved down to 1st of July, and then now 2021. For the consumer, you would should I say the government is using it as some sort of palliative, given the context of
the COVID-19,
reduced incomes, some people out of work. So it's one way to put a bit more money in the pockets of people. As from a consumer standpoint, you would want increased power before you pay more. But from a supply standpoint, the supplier will tell you that increased price is the incentive for increased output. So, the plan was to increase the tariffs by about 100% in some places. So increased income for these discos will go a long way in improving their capacity and all whatnot. Some of them are still grappling with loans and, the issue of, what they call it, estimated billing, because we don't have metering issues, so to speak. So, the discos ordinarily would procure these meters, then install it in your households, but funding issues and all of that. So increased tariffs
even with the discos,
solve that problem.
Even with the discos, they were like, okay, that they are not even ready to take up for this tariff increment for July 1. Perhaps they've not been able to put a lot of things
in place. Yes, so they're still grappling with major issues. So if you take the current state of the industry and say, okay, you wanted to double power output, obviously you start from the generation companies, the transmission company, down to the distribution company. You would need to meter as many households as opposed to, getting estimated billing.
Which hasn't been done.
Which hasn't been done. That's a major constraint to collect their collections. And if they can sort that out between now and 2021, obviously then when they increase the tariffs, even if it's not 100% increase as they are expected to do, and if they can meter as many people as possible and able to get as much income as possible, then that gives them incentive to increase output, so to speak.
Okay, and another burning economic issue there is that FAN has raised airport taxes by 100%, and that will take effect from August. What will be the implication of this for air tickets and even for cargo?
Well, obviously, the immediate impact is an increase in the cost of air tickets, basically. FAN have said that the last time they increased this service charge was back in, I think, about 9 years ago in 2011. So it's long overdue, in my opinion. The increased, it's supposed to fund upgrades and improvements in airport infrastructure, which improve the services, improve sanitation, improve a whole lot of things. So obviously the passengers will pay a bit more. For international flights, it goes from $50 to about $100. So that additional $50 on your tickets, some may frown at it, but if we can see these improvements and upgrades in infrastructure, then it's something that is welcome.
What about goods that are being cargoed?
Well, it's specifically for says passengers. So I don't know if it applies to cargoes, but obviously if it does, then we'll have increased transportation costs, so to speak. Okay.
Now, there's this back and forth thing on price control, or for the petrol pricing. What would be the implication if not properly handled? Because the PPRA seem to be insisting that they have to get hold of the price and keep controlling the price, but the marketers are saying it's not working. So does it mean that government is not even ready to do away with subsidy, even though they said they have already done that?
At the moment, it appears, as you have said, the PPRA have insisted that they would, give the pricing guidelines within which, a price range within which you will set your prices. A couple of months ago, or about a month ago, they deregulated the importation of PMS. So it wasn't just NNPC bringing it in. So if you have NNPC and other private marketers bringing it in, NNPC obviously will have the exchange rates at the official price, but the marketers, we don't know where they source their forex. So when you bring it in, I mean, what price do you set? What's the ex-depot price? You now get down to your pump price. The price modulation has been in place since March. They went down to 125, down to 123. So if oil prices rise, do we see a gradual, steady increase? And you would expect that for a deregulated market, prices would depend on the cost of the commodity overseas and the exchange rate. But now that you've set the price, those variables, they wouldn't matter as much. And it would create some sort of disincentive for private marketers.
So even now that they've been asked to, they can actually import their own product and not just NNPC importing. But that's, I mean, with the exchange rate thing that you have talked about, would they be able to now do that?
I mean, if you bring in your product at 450, 455, and the NNPC brings the product at 380, there's a huge disparity. You just can't compete. So your ex-depot price will be far higher than NNPC's, and everybody will simply buy from NNPC. So as long as that disparity exists, is a disincentive to the whole thing. So the ambiguity now is, okay, if oil prices rise back up to 50, 60, and obviously the price of imported price of PMS goes up, would we see a reintroduction of subsidy? The prices remain at 123, 124, 125. Do you go back to 145? A lot of questions that need to be answered. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lack of clarity, and it's a great disincentive for any investor in the sector.
The government, the PPRA is saying that the reason they would have to take hold of the price and keep controlling it is because they wouldn't want these marketers to exploit, the citizens or whoever.
Yes.
Does that really hold water?
I mean, for them, I mean, for the people, for the consumer, a lot of people might say, yes, I mean, it's the right thing for PPRA to do, because if you leave it to the marketers, they might increase prices, willingly, and it might get up to 170, 180. But as long as the price of crude oil is the major ingredient to the price of PMS, if that continues to rise, and if the ex-depot price continues to rise as well, do we get to a point where the government reintroduces subsidy when it's said that it's completely done away with the subsidy regime? So in that event, in the event that oil prices rise, you would see an increased price of PMS, whether we like it or not. So that you're protecting consumers from price gouging and all of that. Eventually, the chicken will come home to roost, and there's not much the PPRA can do.
All right, let's look at the global oil market. Of course, investors are wary about the sharp spikes in new coronavirus infections around the world. Does that worry you too? And how much impact do you see that having on oil price? I mean, today we saw the price fall this morning.
The market is simply looking for things to galvanize, to boost its sentiment. Right now, the news of Libya that's adding to pressures. We've seen countries, lifting lockdowns. We're hearing of a resurgence in coronavirus cases, which might lead to another round of lockdowns. We would heavily hurt energy demand globally and depress prices. And if you add that to the Libya, factor in Libya into the equation, that's beginning to paint a grim picture. So we might see by the end of the week, if things continue the way they have, keep seeing an increased number of cases, spike in number of cases in more advanced countries, the bigger consumers of crude oil, that might see oil prices drop back to, say, 36, 37 by the end of the week.
Now, OPEC Plus supply cuts have been helping, keep oil prices afloat. In the next few days, we'll be getting some kind of data or clues on the June compliance.
Yes.
Now, those countries that were accused of not complying, are they complying now?
Yes, they have taken major steps to comply, Nigeria being one of them. Not just that they are now in compliance, they are where they were said to have cheated and, supplied higher than they should have. They are taking extra steps to cut supply to account for the extra supply they had in the past. So I think it pays every member of OPEC and the OPEC Plus. They came together for a reason, and cheating does not help anyone at the moment. I mean, the Saudi Arabia is by far the biggest. If Saudi Arabia decides to cheat, then the whole agreement is scattered. So for the smaller, Nigeria, Iraq, and other smaller producers, it makes sense that they fall in line, and we expect to see that by the time the data is released, that they've fallen well in line. And
okay, now that we're seeing rising cases of COVID-19, and then the 9.7 million barrels per day that was extended till July, do you see any further extension with this continued, with the fear of this continuous rise in COVID-19?
I think it remains to be seen. We know that the fall in oil prices have crippled a lot of shale oil producers in the U.S. So U.S. oil output is a bit lower. So as the weeks go by, as we hear that cases are rising and we hear that countries are beginning to lock down again, that's when OPEC Plus might decide to take action. They'll basically wait and see and observe the markets and may call for an extraordinary meeting. And I don't know how much further some of the smaller OPEC nations may cut. So the big ones like Saudi Arabia may decide to, take the burden of increased output cuts on their shoulders and, just to balance things out at the moment.
All right, in all of these that we've talked about, what is the outlook for the domestic commodities markets?
Okay, we heard that there's an announcement of, the lifting of interstate movements. So commodity prices have been high because of this disruption to the commodity supply chain and logistics issues. So with that factor taken away, we expect prices to fall, to ease down slowly, not steep drops, but ease down slowly in the coming months of the year. So it's something that has added to food inflation in the last 3 months. So we expect food inflation to ease a little bit in the coming 2 to 3 months.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Nosike.
Always my pleasure.
Nosike Nwajide is one of the research analysts with Financial Derivatives Company.